All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Record Straight.
Hello again. How is everyone going?
I was waiting for them.
I'm sure everyone's fine.
I was waiting for them to talk back there for a second, but here we are in a new room yet again.
We like this room. This is the podcast space, which is where we should have been probably the whole time.
Well, I think the people in the Creative Hub think that we're too loud, so they just keep moving rooms around.
They love us.
They do love us.
It's
they do love
fine.
us. But now we're shoved down the bottom in the corner where no one else can hear us. Everyone goes in here.
Fine.
But today is a really special kind of, I wouldn't say special, today's going to be a really informative chat.
Yeah,
and it's something that we deal with on a daily basis. It's a question that I reckon we receive daily from artists.
Probably
and it's
one of the most talked about and wanting answers and all of the one that everyone wants to know about.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, totally. So
for career growth.
Totally. So we're going to be talking on the topic of record labels, and the impact of record labels, the different types of record labels, what they involve, the benefit and the pros and cons to an artist in 2025 and 2026. I do think we should start really with our experience of record labels, because you and I both have varying experiences prior to Cartel, and now even with Cartel, we deal with labels on a daily basis, all different types of labels on a daily basis. And why don't you get started with just your experience, because you're way more experienced in labels than I am.
That is absolutely not true. I guess pre-Cartel or during Cartel, my first experience with a record label was I was very, very lucky enough to be working with One Love Music Group. They are the founders of Stereosonic. They have a whole bunch of different artists. They're a huge electronic Melbourne label. They are probably one of the biggest independent electronic dance labels. And yeah, very, very lucky to have started my journey with them when I was younger. Ant and Frank were wonderful to me. I was a publicist there, but they taught me a whole bunch of different record label things, including publishing, sync licensing, catalog, distribution, basically everything that we have in our label service and communications offerings have come and some part from their teachings, which has been really, really lovely. And how we've kind of extended that is me and you gained experience with independent artists, and then we've kind of worked in the model of the label and the independent artist, and now we have a service that is a label standard release plan, which we both worked on. But that basically started with Antonio Celestinos, who we're hoping to get on this podcast, please, who has taught me a lot of that stuff as I was moving forward. So I started as a publicist at a label. From there, I suppose, I learned about artists. You jumped on board and you can talk about your own experience. Mm-hmm. And then with Cartel, the labels that we work with now are One Love Music Group. We worked with majors, including Ireland and EMI, Universal Virgin. Yeah. We've worked with subs of majors. We've worked with international labels and their subsidiaries in Australia, which we were very lucky to work with XL Recordings and
Remote Control
in a varying capacities. We do label servicing, obviously. We do communications, social media strategy, all 4 different labels. We were lucky enough to do publicity for XL and Remote Control. We work with I'm rambling. You can stop me if you like.
That's all right. That's all right. So essentially in labels, your experience kind of started as a publicist, and then you're able to kind of learn.
We've developed the comms.
Yeah, off the back of
aspect of that.
Yeah. Our whole business is based off the back of our experience and your experience through labels. I mean, you worked at One Love for how long? 3 years?
3.5 years.
Yeah, 3.5 years in varying kind of roles. I guess my experience with labels is a little bit different. I've never technically worked in a label outside of kind of label servicing, which is what we do now. But my experience is with record labels has always been from the realm of an artist or as an artist manager dealing with labels. which
was so much fun.
Yeah, you missed that part.
I did miss that part. I glanced right over it.
So I was lucky enough with my production process, with my production project, to be signed to a multitude of different labels, major, indie, and sub. Yep. The most notable for me was I was signed to a label called Vicious Recordings on a multi-track deal.
8-track, yeah.
Which also had an album option at the end of it, which I didn't get to because I stopped my project. But I guess this part of it is more so just to kind of really help you guys understand that we are quite experienced in the label realm and have had multiple different experiences. I think the one thing that I'm kind of really interested in is dealing with a label from a manager's perspective and how that is different, you know, as a service business as well of what we do now. And one of the things that we really wanted to dive into heavily today and really kind of break down was the different types of labels that there are, because there are differences and, you know, differences in resources, differences in the ability to be able to actually develop an artist or develop a catalog. But essentially the way that... Or create income off the back of a catalog.
Well, that's what they're made for.
Yeah.
So essentially, and you were speaking about this before the podcast, talk to me about what a label actually is.
So in its broadest sense, a record label's job is to be able to develop an artist and or their catalog to a point of generating revenue.
Yeah.
We can talk...
Their main focus is to build money and financial benefit off an artist catalog.
Exactly.
That is a huge distinction, independent artists that are listening, to what we get on a day-to-day. A lot of independent artists want labels. I just want to make this very clear. I know I'm rambling and off topic, but independent artists often think if they get signed to a label, their whole development plan, their whole project, everything is going to be taken care of and how amazing, and it often doesn't happen like that. And then we need to be very clear from the beginning, and you'll go through the different types of labels and the different types of deals, and we can talk about that. But if you are looking as an independent artist to get signed to a label, firstly, it's not as easy as I'm just going to get signed. There are a lot of tick boxes that we can go through, but it also is about understanding that a label will not develop your entire project for you. They will help with the artist and repertoire, the A&R, the catalog, but it will not help with your overall development. And I think going into that, going into any deal or any building block is really important to understand, because then you get artists that have signed major deals and they have to start from the beginning once they realize that, you know, labels are not going to develop artists' core project narrative. It's very rare. Sorry, I rambled.
I think, and there's a really big difference between the primary objective of what a label was, you know, in the 90s, 80s, even the early 2000s versus now. You know, we get a lot of discussion between artists around like, why do I even sign to a label? Their job is to develop me and blah, blah, blah. Just to go on with what you said, it's not their job to develop you. Label's job is to develop the catalog to a point where it can generate revenue for them and for you. And
depending on where you're at in your cycle, in your journey, they do help to a degree. Like, for example, we work with Vera. We've work, depending on where we're at when this comes out, with Vera Blue. Vera Blue's label help her develop her catalog and build narrative around that. But Celia had other people in her team that were building her shows, her actual narrative and communication online, her media and publicity that wasn't just stemming from the label development. So I think that at its broadest term, a label will help you develop if you're at a level where your development is something that can be attached to your catalog. But if you're, you know, on a 1 or 2 or 8-track deal like you were with Vicious, it's not just their job to help develop the artist as a whole. It was Guy's job at Vicious to build your catalog and build the trajectory of what your production was and what, like, getting better and putting you with songwriting and all of those things. But it was not his job, nor is it any label's job to develop your narrative. We still did a lot of work on collaborations and your branding and yours and James's overarching communication strategies and things like that.
Their job was to be able to sell the catalog that we provided them and to be able to help develop that catalog.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good segue into, the main responsibilities of people at labels. The one thing that I get questions on all the time is what the hell is an A&R and what does an A&R do for me?
I still don't know what an A&R does.
It's so funny. I was actually listening to a podcast the other day and an A&R literally said, I have no idea what A&R is, but I know what I do.
Yeah. It's so varied.
For sure.
So varied.
I think in the simplest terms, to break down what an A&R actually is, A is artist and R is repertoire. Repertoire means catalog. So developing an artist and their catalog. Essentially the main role of an A&R.
To the point of generating revenue.
Essentially the point of an A&R is to be able to help an artist develop sonically, also develop, be able to connect what they're doing narrative-wise to what they're doing sonically, and also be the voice in the building on behalf of the artist, particularly at a major level. I think that's, again, I'm segueing really well today. That's a really good segue into the next kind of tip, which is, or the next kind of bit, which is what are the different types of labels.
Yep.
So essentially, to break it down broadly, and then we can go into each one of them and our experiences or whatever. At the very top of, I guess, the food chain that have the most kind of, or did have the most monopoly on the industry are your major labels. And essentially...
Universal, Warner.
Sony, etc.
Big dogs.
Yeah. And essentially, they are a massive machine.
Yeah.
They have multiple different departments. Obviously an A&R department, they have a marketing department within the territory, and then international marketing, they have PR, communications. A lot of the time they do distribution internally or own distribution companies. Everything happens from within the building, essentially. Then under that, you've got what's called subsidiary labels, or sub-labels is what they're called. And they're essentially just offshoots of majors.
That use similar resources, the same or similar or portions of the resources.
Totally.
Of the major labels.
Yeah. And generally a sub-label is more based around a specific type of genre or a specific type of vibe.
Could be artist-centric as well.
Yeah, an artist-centric, like an artist generally, like, this happens a lot in dance or electronic spheres where an artist will create their own label as a subsidiary of a major or a larger independent.
Yeah.
And then the third type of label is the independent record label, which is a label that has no kind of connection to a major system, that operates independently, creates its own income, creates its own revenue through the catalog that it releases. So throughout our experience, we've had dealings with or have worked with in some form all three types of labels and have different experiences with different lots. I think for the artists that are really listening, I think what's going to be really valuable for them to understand is, monopoly. And what I mean by that is, like, not the game, obviously, but the monopoly of what control different labels had versus what they have now.
Yeah.
And so, you look at the early 2000s, you look at the 90s, the 80s, and the ways that artist and catalog were developing in those days was very centric around radio, because that's where the majority of audiences were consuming or discovering their music. Yeah. So having a major label record deal at that time was kind of very, very, very important, because they had the monopoly on radio. They had the ability to be able to go and say, hey, X radio station, take this artist that we're developing and you'll be able to get the next Britney Spears record if you're able to do this. And we're able to kind of leverage that. Whereas now,
I think to a degree now it's the same. They do have it, but it's just that audiences are discovering artists differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if we look at the music trajectory overall, discovery happened through radio, predominantly through those times globally. Then we moved into iTunes and streaming and LimeWire and all that came with that. That was a fun time of our teenage years. And then we moved into streaming. And, majors always had that monopoly on editorial playlisting. But I think the difference now is we are moving into more interest media and algorithmically driven discovery, which makes that monopoly or that control. Yeah, that monopoly or that control is a lot harder to monopolize.
Well, it's spread more evenly.
Exactly. So, we've moved from a situation where you almost needed a major label to be able to break it, to where now, artists have the ability to be able to do that independently without a label at all.
Yeah.
So I guess my question now is, what makes labels relevant and what makes them helpful at any form of level? So obviously at the major level, they have essentially money and resources that, subs and indies and independent artists probably don't have.
Definitely
which is one thing.
Yeah.
But what makes them a reliable tool now for an independent act who's looking to develop? It's hard.
I want to say
it's got to be resource, right?
Yeah, I guess so. It also, there shouldn't be an impact. Independent artists don't need major labels at this moment.
That's what I was looking
in
for.
Their, yeah.
That's what I was looking for.
I don't want to say that they're irrelevant to an independent artist, but I don't think that should be the goal. I mean, firstly, we're in artist development, right? Yeah. And our main focus at Cartel is to ensure that an artist is growing and building into their journey, whatever that end goal would be.
Totally.
And for us, and for the artists that we work with and what we preach, there are so many ways to grow. There's creative ways to grow. There are ways to develop that sit outside of relying upon media or industry or resources at all. And it sits squarely on an artist's shoulders. It sits on how much they're willing to work for it, how much they're willing to tunnel through, how much they're willing to develop and build and grow on their own. Yep. And I think that, to answer your question, major labels don't offer development for independent artists, really, essentially, unless they pluck them out of obscurity and can kind of tailor and mold and manipulate the messaging, the narrative and the catalogue for years and years and years and years to make that catalogue and that artist work, which happens. But for the majority of independent artists, the major label system and the resources are not relevant.
Yeah.
You as an independent artist can build and grow to a point where you can get to a major label deal that you can actually utilize and actually know what you're doing within way faster by yourselves. And I think...
And have control and ownership over your catalogue. Yeah.
It's just so important. Artists get so bogged down in, I need to be signed to a label because I need them to do X, Y, and Z for me. Firstly, and everyone who has listened to every other podcast that we have, do it yourself. There are so many resources for you to do it yourself. For free. Yeah. You just have to do the work. And unfortunately, it's just become more and more apparent that artists need to do that. And it unfortunately sucks, but it is what it is.
Well, it doesn't suck.
Well, I don't think it sucks.
It doesn't suck because it's the reality
artists think it sucks though.
It's never been, well, who cares, right?
You got to do it, guys.
That's the reality. The reality is at this stage of development, we've got two sides. We've got the creative and we've got how we communicate that creative to an audience that's likely to care, right? If you can do those things on your own, you don't need a label.
And also, it's a lot easier if you can balance those and you build them and you continue to build them.
Yeah.
It is easier for you to get a label deal.
Yeah.
Indie developing, whatever it is, because at some points they are really useful.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. I think where majors in particular are really good are when you're focusing on developing in other territories. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you're an Australian artist, but your focus or you've found that you've hit a niche in Poland, for example, or the UK or Germany or something like that.
Very specific example, Poland.
Generally, what will happen is that a major partner will be able to have resources that they can deploy within that territory to help you develop faster than you trying to develop, because
Correct.
how catalog development works in Australia versus how it happens across the rest of the world is very, very, very different.
Yeah.
The way that we consume music, the way that music reaches us, all of that stuff is a lot different now than what it was before. But majors are always going to be tapped into that because they have, you know,
They have a global
again,
hold.
they have the monopoly of control there. I think, you know, to go on with what you were saying before, I agree. It's not that, you know, I don't want to make this like a pro and con thing for labels, because I think that there is a place for labels. I think what I really want independent artists to understand about labels is they are a resource to be able to develop catalogs sonically and to be able to develop with resource. They are not there to develop an audience. A label's main objective for an artist is to create income. That income can come through a multitude of ways, whether it be publishing, whether it be through royalties, sync, whatever.
Depends on the deal.
And that all depends on the deal. But, you know, if you're signing to a label because they can speak to Spotify and get you onto editorial playlisting, you are missing the whole point of your
You
development.
can also do that with a distribution team that you
Independently.
can speak to independently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and again, like, I think it's a really good distinction between, all right, we've spoken about the three different forms of labels, so major, sub, and indie.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about distribution on the other side.
Yeah.
Because I think distribution is really important. And just to give artists context around the different types of distribution before we kind of get into it, is there's three different types of distributors out there. There's aggregate distributors, and they're distributors like DistroKid, TuneCore, CD Baby, you know, and all of the kind of aggregate.
They're like plug and play models.
Essentially what you'll do is you'll sign up, you'll pay like a $20 fee or however much it is, and they provide the base level of
They get your music
distro.
on streaming.
They get your music on streaming, they put it on the right profile, and they regulate distribution royalties, right? Then the next step is what's called a more personalized distributor, and their role is to provide exactly what the base aggregate producers will do, a distribution will do, but they'll also be a team around you that will be able to develop your narrative on stores and develop it and provide an initial pitch. So
Mostly.
Essentially what
A lot of those mid-tier ones are now moving into a submission portal model
yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But above that, you know, generally they'll be able to go and start talking to stores on behalf of the artist. Yeah. Then the next tier above that is the label distribution model, which is where distribution will operate on behalf of a label. So for most of the...
they have a specific label and distribution team that talk to each other, that build out the narrative, that build out the pitch.
Yeah.
And kind of a global strategy.
Yeah.
For each
So
of the streaming
for
services.
most acts that are signed to an independent label, that label actually outsources distribution generally to an outsourced label distributor, right? So the question, particularly with independent labels, is why go to the label when we can go directly to a distributor?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, I'm not sitting here saying that we have the answer, because we don't, and every artist is different. Some artists may need access to those resources, some artists may not. But I think in terms of an artist looking to actually, you know, develop and understand, okay, do I need this or don't I need this? What really is important to understand is your endpoint, right? And we speak about this in every podcast. What are we actually trying to achieve with this project? Are we trying to achieve some form of sustainability out of this project financially? And how does your catalog allow you to do that?
Yeah, how does it support
You know, and essentially creating demand for your catalog at the core sense allows you to leverage that demand into other areas, whether it be touring, whether it be songwriting opportunities, sync and licensing, publishing, the list goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you need a label to do that is always going to be a case by case. I will say that I think labels need to adapt with the current market that we're in every model.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, because in the 90s, the 2000s and stuff, it was about developing audience because we were able to leverage that because discovery worked differently, like we mentioned. Whereas now labels are less likely to jump on an act
if they don't already have that inbuilt audience.
Yeah, I agree. And there are a few tick boxes that need to be met. And also in our experience with labels, the priority of which artists they select to move forward with is a little bit behind the eight ball in what we can see. Like, for example, in what we have experienced, so this is not going to be for every label in every case, but they either plucked from obscurity very, very early, thinking that they can manipulate a specific look, vibe, artist brand, and build upon that. And oftentimes, just because of the way of the world, if they don't get a hit TikTok single or whatever, it is really not beneficial for an artist because they have no say in their development, they have no control, and then they get shelved or dropped, which is they start from square one again. Yeah. Then there's labels who choose artists that we've seen off the back of, we can take on this song because it's really great, and then the song does really well, but they fail to put in the safeguards, and the artist doesn't develop in audience or in data collection or anything like that. So the label's doing their job in terms of building the catalog, selling the record, but there's a disconnect because artists are then not developing their own channels of audience consumption and discovery and engagement. So there's no middle point. And so what is really interesting in our experience is the onus isn't just on labels anymore. So you spoke about 90s and 2000s labels and how they had the control over the artist, and the artist did what they said.
Well, they also had control over them over discovery, really.
Totally. Yeah. And now it's like the onus is on the artist, and we keep saying it every single discussion that we have in Cartel is to the artist going, what are you doing? And so for everyone, artist-wise, independents mostly listening, how are you valuable to your audience? How are you creating value for your audience? And if you are wanting to be signed to a label, why? How are you going to be valuable to the label? How are you going to continue your artist consumption, artist discovery, artist engagement when you get onto a label? And how are you building your processes out so you can keep a label accountable to the whole process?
I think it's the best way to break it down. I think this is a good kind of, bow that we can use to wrap this up. But a label, regardless of the size, regardless of what type, even distribution, is an extension of the artist business.
Million.
So if we're talking, and again, this whole podcast series, our entire business is about helping artists develop sustainability as artists, whether that be career or whether that be able to create enough financial income to be able to funnel it back into the project. A label's primary role is to be able to sell records, right? And, that can be not only through what happens within the digital sphere, that can also happen through how they sell physically. Mm-hmm. A lot of labels, particularly majors, will have a hand in what they do with merchandising, right? And how they are able to recoup on what they have spent. Mm-hmm. I don't think, based on our experience and all that kind of stuff, we have a lot of experience with it, but I don't think it's something that we necessarily need to go through, is the idea of an advance and what that means.
Yeah.
Because I think it's been well documented through socials and stuff like that. But I think the main thing that we want artists to take away is we don't need a label to develop sustainability, but a label can add to the business in certain aspects.
When the business is ready, and also artists, please be aware
and if it's needed.
Yeah. Please ensure that you understand if you are going to go into a label deal, you ask 1,000 questions. Come and ask us about different things, whatever questions that you have. Go and see a lawyer. Going into a label deal will not solve your problems. can often amplify them.
It might amplify them,
Yeah.
but it won't. I hope that it does do what you want it to do, but it probably won't, because it comes with a whole set of new challenges that you need to understand.
Totally.
So before you sign any label deal at all, independent artists, please be aware of what you're signing. There are so many artists that we know that have signed deals, maybe understanding what they were doing, but not having a grasp on how they are going to, how the label is going to assist in development. And it's either gone really, really well, which is great, but sometimes there are stories where artists get churned through and then get bitter and that's happened a bit. And we hear from a lot of artists that that's happened too. Not that we think that labels are bad. They need to be, an independent artist needs to be really clever about how they develop and use a label when it's needed, when you're ready, and when you understand. Yeah,
exactly. I think that's kind of
we can
like,
wrap that up now.
Yeah, I think that's a good time to kind of wrap it up. And again, I think this is a really good episode, kind of based on our perspective and our experience. One of the things that we want to do with this podcast is we always want to speak from our experience and our knowledge base, but we also want to bring people in who are experts in that field. So we're one of the things that we want to work on is being episodes like this, where we can bring in someone from a label that can further expand on this, which is what we're going to be doing in the future.
Yeah. So hopefully there's a part 2 to this, where we have an A&R from a label. Antonio, please come and listen and come and be a part of it. And we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to wrap things up, like, follow, subscribe, all the pluggy stuff. If any artists have any questions about this episode, please feel free to shoot us a DM at cartel.australia. We are always around and we are always open to speak. And we hope you guys enjoy the episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, guys. Bye.